everyone. Can I just check that you can still hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Good. Thank you.
Ben, any rules about tweeting and social media?
I think Johnny or June, correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean it's a public event. We've advertised it on our social media, so I think if the other speakers are happy, we haven't said it's Chatham House because it's being live streamed, so it'd be difficult to be Chatham House. So I think if everyone's happy, I think tweeting is fine.
We're live now, by the way, just so.
Ah, okay. So shall I begin? Well, good morning and welcome, and good evening to anybody who's joining us from other time zones. It's a great pleasure and privilege to welcome you all to this very timely and important webinar organized by Hong Kong Watch. I'm Benedict Rogers, the co-founder and chief executive of Hong Kong Watch, and it's a particular privilege to welcome a really distinguished panel of speakers to address this question of the implementation of the BNO policy. We've got less than, well, probably about 2 months before the, just over 2 months before the policy takes effect, and we look forward to welcoming friends from Hong Kong who decide to take up this new, very generous and very unprecedented scheme that the government has introduced. This is a program that Hong Kong Watch really has advocated since the very beginning of our work. Hong Kong Watch was founded 3 years ago, and addressing the rights and increasing the rights of British national overseas status holders in Hong Kong was a priority for us from the very beginning, and particularly for some of our patrons. One of our founding patrons, and I think our first speaker will probably say more about him, but one of our founding patrons was the late and wonderful Paddy Ashdown, and this was a cause that he particularly championed. One of our other patrons, Lord Alton of Liverpool, has been a champion of this as well. And so we've worked hard as an organization for this. I'm not sure we ever actually dared imagine that the government would go as far as they did. And of course, it was only in response to the imposition of the national security law in Hong Kong that the government did announce this scheme. But we really welcome what they have offered. And I think our task in this webinar today is to unpack the details of the policy, look at some of the challenges in the implementation of the policy, and above all, make sure that whilst the offer is incredibly generous, that the implementation is effective, and that we really do our best to make sure that Hong Kongers who take up this offer are welcomed into the UK, are helped to settle here, and that they can understand and navigate all the details of the process. So that's what our distinguished panel today is going to help us to do. And it's a very great pleasure. I'll introduce each speaker before they speak. And so it's a pleasure to begin with Layla Moran, the Liberal Democrat spokesperson on foreign affairs and international development. Layla has been the Member of Parliament for Oxford West and Abingdon since 2017. And in just the few months that she has been in her current post as the foreign affairs spokesperson, she has been a tremendous champion of Hong Kong and an ally on this specific issue as well. So without any further ado, Layla Moran, thank you so much for joining us, and I invite you now to address us.
Well, thank you, first of all, so much, Benedict, and other distinguished panelists and everyone who's watching. Thank you for that lovely introduction. And as you say, I immediately took this up, and it has been front and center of my platform so far in this role, but that is because I stand very much on the shoulders of giants. And you mentioned Paddy, who was an enormous inspiration for me growing up, partly responsible for why I even took notice from a young age of the Liberal Democrats. He very much championed education. I was a maths and physics teacher before I was an MP. And he absolutely had the interests of Hong Kongers in his heart throughout the whole time that he was leader, and indeed beyond. And in 2018 wrote about how we cannot forget about Hong Kong in the context of our responsibility as a nation to other parts of the world. By that point, we'd already seen the way that China was beginning to behave, the shift in stance, I think it's fair to say, to a much more authoritarian way of ruling from Xi Jinping and the Communist People's Party. And he was very concerned, and in many ways he preempted what we then saw over the last year and a half or so, certainly in the eyes of people in Britain. Of course, those of you who are on the ground in Hong Kong will have seen it much longer than that. And Aleister Carmichael, who was in this role before me, I think it's fair to say has also done an extraordinary amount on this over a number of years, and it would be absolutely remiss of me not to mention his continued contribution. And he and I work very closely together, and I'll talk very briefly about his bill. So I thought I'd start with the most recent. You know, where are we now? What is the political appetite for helping? And where do we think this is going to go? In a funny way, it's taken China to misbehave so badly for Britain to wake up to its long-standing responsibility to Hong Kong residents. My own view and my party's view is that this courtesy of coming and being British if they want to be should have been extended to Hong Kongers a long time ago. It shouldn't have been something also that had an arbitrary cutoff of, you know, having had a BNO passport from 97, and we never envisaged, I don't think, that actually the large swathes of young people who are the ones who are on the streets protecting democracy are in fact completely missing. As you said, Benedict, I am also pleasantly surprised by how far the Conservative Party has moved towards this, especially given its hostile environment, the way that it's been portraying itself, certainly through the Brexit era, and to positively welcome literally millions of people from somewhere very far away is just not in step with what people see as the modern Conservative Party. And I think that's really credit to Hong Kong Watch and other civil society groups that have successfully made that cross-party working possible. And this is very much a cross-party effort. So it's not just me that speaks up for this. I sit in IPAC, which is a cross-party group of parliamentarians, not just in this country, but also across the world, where we are fighting for rights of Hong Kongers, but also for the rights of the Uyghurs. We're now obviously very concerned with Inner Mongolia, and in general, the way that China is portraying itself on the global world stage, because this has been moving in a direction of ever strident China for some time. And my own view is that the pandemic is only going to accelerate that process. And so we worked very much cross-party. And so when last week I had my urgent question on this, where I raised specifically the issue of BNO passport holders, I secured a meeting with the minister, which we're pursuing very, very aggressively, simply because of the time. We need to make sure that we iron out some of the issues around the passports as quickly as possible. In the short term, and this is partly why this is very useful to have this conversation today, I want to raise the very specifics of the cost. So whilst on the one hand they're saying the visa cost isn't a lot, well, actually, if you look at the total cost, and that's even before living costs, it is significant. And it means that, and a lot of people are just assuming, because the financial services sector is so strong in Hong Kong that everyone there is rich. Well, it's just simply not true. You could equally say that everyone in London's rich because we've got the city. It's just, we know that's not true, and it's the very people who've been protesting that find themselves, even if they were eligible for the scheme, excluded from it. So that's one of the things that I specifically want to raise. But the other, and I think it is very important, and this is where there might be some movement. And I was very pleased behind the scenes to be having conversations with some prominent people in the Conservative Party who absolutely agree that this should be extended to those who are currently excluded, and not just to family members of people who are eligible, but actually just as an open blanket policy for any Hong Konger, especially those who have put themselves on the line with all of the security concerns that now go with being a political activist in Hong Kong right now, especially them, but actually anybody who feels for whatever reason they want to come here. And I'm encouraged to say, and this is, by the way, what Aleister Carmichael's bill does, and so we're using that as a vehicle to push this. And I'm cautiously optimistic to say that it is being heard. Now, whether or not they'll do something about it is, I very much see as my job. It's what I want to achieve. I'm very much a politician that doesn't believe in just talking. I think it's really important we actually get stuff done. And I think that finding some way of addressing those issues that I've just mentioned is my current aim. And so to the future, I want to work with Hong Kong Watch, with others, with anyone at all across the Houses of Parliament who are interested in this, and there are a lot, to form that cross-party coalition to keep that pressure up within Parliament, so that we can get the very practical issues addressed for those citizens who want to come over. And more broadly, bluntly, we know those who want to come feel they have to come. Many would much rather stay in Hong Kong. And the bigger picture stuff that we're working on as well is, what do we do about this strident China? How do we deal with this? And is there any way we can influence it? And I'm not big-headed enough to think that me alone, or even the Lib Dems, or even just the British Parliament alone is going to do this. This is going to have to be an international effort, where we essentially get China to meet its international obligations in law, and that's going to take more than one country. So as a bit of a précis, I appreciate that I've probably gone over my 10-minute slot now. That's what I'm trying to achieve, but thank you all for inviting me today, and I look forward to your questions.
Well, thank you so much, Layla, for that extremely valuable first presentation. And I think there are a number of things that you've highlighted that are so important. It was very helpful that you put it in the context of the bigger picture of what's happening politically in Hong Kong and in China as a whole. And of course, we have another reminder of the tragic and rapid destruction of Hong Kong's freedoms just today, with the arrest of three former legislators who were thrown out of the legislature last week. Pretty much every week, almost every day, we're waking up to more bad news from Hong Kong. And of course, all the wider issues, which I'm also very engaged with, the Uyghurs and Tibet and Inner Mongolia and other issues. So thank you for putting it in that context. I think also the need for international action. One of the things Hong Kong Watch has been advocating in regard to this topic is an international lifeboat rescue program, so that, yes, absolutely, Britain must do its part and must do more for non-BNOs as well, as you've said. But we're also encouraging other countries to coordinate and to work with us to ensure that every Hong Konger who needs and wants to get out has a place of sanctuary to go to. And lastly, let me echo your remarks about the cross-party nature of this, and particularly your tribute to Aleister Carmichael, who is a patron of Hong Kong Watch. He took over as a patron after Paddy died. but also MPs on all sides. And it would be remiss of me not to acknowledge the efforts of Steve Double, who was an ally very early on, Tom Tugendhat on the Labour side, people like Sarah Champion, and the Labour front bench. So, as you say, it really is a cross-party effort, and that's a very good thing. So thank you, Layla Moran. We'll come back to you in the Q&A. I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions arising. But let me go now to our next speaker, who it's a privilege to introduce by the name of Perseus. And Perseus is a good friend. He's worked with us in Hong Kong Watch on many things. He has done so much behind the scenes to help so many Hong Kongers. I don't think I even know the full extent of what he's done, but I know he works night and day to help people. Perseus is an immigration lawyer. He's also a very active blogger and journalist and photographer, so all-round mix of talents, but I think speaking primarily with his expertise in immigration law. And Perseus, I think, will set out some of the details of the policy and perhaps some of the challenges of implementation going forward. So Perseus, over to you.
Thank you, Ben. It's an honour to join such a distinguished panel, and thank you for the invitation. I think it's right to remember that this scheme has come about, as Layla and you have introduced, has come about as a result of the national security law coming into place at the end of June. So we heard noises from the British government in May when the Chinese government first announced they were going to do this. And so I think it's with a view that we have to remember that this is kind of echoing almost what John Major said in '97, where he said, if there's any breaches, Hong Kong will never stand alone. And I think this is an extension of that promise. So I think if we kind of have a look at the what is being proposed, since the government has actually laid before Parliament suggested proposals as to how they wish to change the immigration rules. So we have now a kind of a more concrete idea as to where they want to go with this. Firstly, we obviously know that this is primarily designed for people who hold BNO status and their family members. So one thing to remember is that you don't actually need a valid BNO passport. You just need to have had your registration to be a BNO status holder on or before the 30th of June 1997. Now, that obviously poses a lot of problems. You know, the Layla's already mentioned the cut-off point at which, you know, registration stopped. 30th of June 97 was the last day. So anyone born after that point, if their parents were not BNO, they're excluded. Also, I think another thing to bear in mind is not only do we potentially cut out a lot of people born after that date, but even those born before the 30th of June, because the problem is you have to have registered for BNO status. So it's not an automatic thing that you got BNO status. You had to actively do a registration. So it may be all well and good for us to say, well, you had your chance, you didn't go for it, then we exclude you. But should we have that attitude? Because obviously a lot of people at that point, having spoken to Hong Kongers, they didn't register for BNO status because they thought we'd give the Chinese government a chance. They're starting to open up. It was based on the promise of one country, two systems that a lot of people thought, we don't need to register for this. We don't need to keep our ties to Britain anymore. Not only that, though, you have people that were born slightly before 97 who were minors up to 30th of June, but they'll also be excluded, not because of a decision they made, but because of a decision their parents made. So I would echo what Layla said. It's right. There are a lot of people excluded from this policy, but at the same time, I think we have to reflect that this is a very different policy to what we imagined the Conservative Party would put forward. And as Ben said, you know, no one dreamed that this would be the case. So I think let's talk about some of the people that are included, having kind of whined about the exclusion. So the main things are obviously you have spouses and dependent children of BNO status holders who are included. The fact of the matter is they don't need to be BNO status holders. They need to show the relationship. They need to be able to show that they can be maintained for 6 months. What is actually really good, though, is that for financial requirements, usually the Home Office say you're going to have very strict sources of support in terms of bank statements, means and stuff. But for the Hong Kong route, they have actually specifically written into the rules that third-party support is allowed. So, for example, if the BNO status holder and his or her family moves to the UK, don't necessarily have a lot of money, but a richer family member who decides to remain in Hong Kong, maybe an extended family member says, I'm willing to support this family, that is also counted towards support, which is a very surprising move by the Home Office. But I suppose in light of the fact that this is a political move, it's a lifeboat, it makes sense. We talk about under 18 children. Now, the Home Office had made a song and dance previously with statements about over 18 children. And they mentioned that there had to be a dependency and so on and so forth. Now, what I got from the proposals at the moment is that actually for the over 18 children, you don't actually even have to show dependency. You just have to show, now they've written it, a proposal, that you just have to show you live in the same household. So that is obviously a lot more generous than we thought they would be. And then you move on to other adult dependent relatives. So in those circumstances, you're going to have to show a dependency as well. One thing I think that is a matter of concern for a lot of people that I've spoken to is the issue of the applications as a family. Now, a lot of people that I have had a chat with have had one parent move with children first, and then the remaining parent is in Hong Kong finalizing affairs or maybe looking for a job before coming. The problem you have is that the Home Office has actually written into the rules that they actually require both parents to apply at the same time with the child. So if you have a dependent BNO child, say mum comes over with a 12-year-old, starts school in the UK, dad is remaining in Hong Kong, that child may face problems come January 31st because he can't apply with both parents at the same time. Dad is still out in Hong Kong. Dad will have to apply for entry clearance, whereas mum will have to apply for leave to remain. They're two separate applications. Now, I suppose technically you could try and do it at the same time and see whether the Home Office buy that. But usually when it says at the same time, it's usually at the same application. So there remains questions in terms of implementation, which is how do we solve the issue where families have split, not because the relationship is over, but for practical reasons. You know, mum here with child, dad back in Hong Kong finalizing affairs, sale of house or whatever. So that is a massive question that probably needs a lot more parliamentary oversight. So that's probably something Layla and Hong Kong Watch will be able to look into. Another issue that people are concerned about is, as you say, Layla, the cost, but also for people that are here in the UK already, who are potentially who fled maybe slightly before the policy announcements. The Home Office have said, you know, you've got a few options. If you want to stay and wait, you know, that's fine. You can either leave the country and come back and then apply for leave outside the rules, get a new stamp on your passport when you come back in. Alternatively, make an application for leave outside the rules, and we'll refund you because obviously there's going to be delays due to the pandemic. both those options are very unattractive, though, because with the pandemic going on, do people really want to be traveling and leaving the UK and then coming back just to get leave outside the rules? But at the same time, they might not have a choice because otherwise they may be classed as overstayers. Second thing is the other option the Secretary of State makes is, well, do a new application, apply for leave outside the rules, and then obviously once your application is made, if you still have valid leave when you made that application, your leave will be extended by law and therefore you are not an overstayer. Now, I think a difficulty of that is the fact that you have an application fee to pay in the first place for that, which is £1,033. You've got to pay for 6 months of the health surcharge, which is now £312, I believe. So you're looking at you're looking at 1,300 something just to apply outside of the rules. Now, an application is not going to be decided by the 31st of January. That's all well and good. That's fine. But you end up potentially having double the cost because, as Layla already flagged up, yes, the visa may be £250, but you've got the health surcharge on top of that, which is over £3,000. So you've already paid out 1,300 something now. Application's not going to be decided. Home Office have promised a refund if the applications aren't decided. But then how does that translate to then applying on the 31st of January? Are they going to simply process the refund as a kind of contribution towards that application, or are they literally going to give you the money back and then you apply afresh? I think that's a question that Layla and her colleagues and also Hong Kong Watch might be able to speak to the Home Office about and the ministers about, because obviously it is a problem. You have a pandemic. I mean, the free way would obviously be travel outside the UK, come back in. But obviously with a pandemic, I'm not entirely sure that's the wisest thing. And also it might be slightly illegal because is leaving your house for a day trip to Europe to come back really an essential travel under the lockdown rules? I'm not giving legal advice on that, but obviously it's a question that we have to ask of the Home Office. So I think I'm probably running into overtime now, but I think those are really the key points I've kind of noted from the new policy proposals. Obviously, I'll continue to work with Hong Kong Watch to keep an eye on it, and obviously Layla's already promised as well that she's going to look into that as well. So I think I'm pretty much out of time, I think, Ben.
That's excellent, Perseus. Thank you so much for setting out some of those issues, which I'm sure we'll come back to shortly. And thank you for everything you do, Perseus. Just to say before we go to our next speaker, this is going out on Facebook Live, and so for viewers who are joining us through Facebook Live rather than actually in the WebEx forum, I believe there is a way, and hopefully it's been communicated to you, for you to send questions if you wish to. And I think my wonderful colleagues from Hong Kong Watch who have helped arrange this will monitor those and will send questions to me, I hope, and I'll then be able to raise them. And for those of you in this WebEx forum, you can certainly send questions to me in the chat, and one or two people have done so already, or to my colleagues in Hong Kong Watch, and they'll send them to me. So we'll come to a time of Q&A very shortly, and you can raise questions in those ways. But let me go now to our next speaker, who is Sunny from HK Brits. And I think Sunny is going to say a little bit about the process of sort of transitioning to life as a Hong Konger to a new life in the UK. So Sunny, welcome, and over to you.
Thank you, Ben. So just a quick background of myself. I have studied and now working in the UK for many years. And I know the challenges for BNOs and Hong Kongers who are planning to come and settle in the UK, Personally, I remember some of the challenges when I first came was having like a language barrier, especially in the UK. There's so many different types of like accent English. So I think the way to move forward is always kind of practice and speak and not to be afraid. And also remember I had some homesick, missing my family and friends back at home because it is a new environment when we first come to the UK as a new place. So, and also probably another challenge was kind of finding a place to rent. Wasn't sure where to go and where to look for houses and stuff. So I was lucky to have a colleague helping me and recommending me a place to do. So kind of looking back at all of these challenges I had, that's why we have created HK Bricks. HK Bricks is a platform that is supported by a group of British and Hong Kong volunteers who want to make the transition more welcoming, as we know how tough it must be to start a new life in a foreign country. So it is a website that is bilingual in both English and traditional Chinese. We try to answer as much queries from BNOs and Hong Kongers as much as we can. Some of the information that we provide on the website is, for example, like housing, the type of houses that we get in the UK, and probably some recommendation of certain areas and towns that people can look into and move to, such as like commuter towns for London. And we try to hope to give some more information to help everyone to settle in. And secondly, we look into healthcare. So one of the examples that we had was a mother whose child was ill, and it was during out of hours time, not sure what to do because the healthcare system is different to Hong Kong. We provided kind of like information on urgent care center, walk-in center, and the free hotline NHS 111. So these are some useful information to help new Hong Kongers coming in to see how we actually going to get to see a doctor during weekend, and also registering with the GPs, which is doctors, which we don't need to do in Hong Kong. So something different just to help everybody out. And maybe some jobs and tips and advice where to look for jobs, what sort of information you probably need to provide for your employers. So just some tips on this area. And banking is important because when everybody comes, we need a bank account. So how to set up your own bank account in the UK. And driving. So, you know, UK is really big. And if you're not living in the city, you need to probably drive around to get by. So can you switch your Hong Kong driving license to the UK license? That is some information there to help you to do it. And of course, we provide some BNO visa information, some updates from the Home Office, just to help out. And they are translated in traditional Chinese as well. So hopefully that will be helpful. And on the other side, our website also tries to provide some social information. So we want to help people to integrate into the UK properly. So maybe sharing some British lifestyle activities that we do here and some British festival. So we have some recommendation of some brilliant hiking spots that you can go to, probably after lockdown, not now. And also some of the visiting some palaces and royal parks. So some activity to do to get outside and move around. And I think mainly, again, education, that's important with parents coming in. So we do have lots of queries from several families having difficulties to kind of look for schools for the children, because at the moment it's an inter-year admission. So we want to provide some more information on how to apply for a school, like state school. So maybe contact the council, and some schools actually need to be applied directly with them. So I think overall, having been a student myself and having interacting with lots of students throughout this time, we do hope the government would consider allowing the time spent on the Tier 4 student visa and Tier 5 working holiday visa to be counted towards the BNO visa, which is currently can't do that. These are a group of young talented people who are not new to the UK and have already integrated and contributed into the society. So the time spent before the BNO visa is available should not be neglected and be allowed to be backdated, given some of them have now switched onto the LTR status. So I think it's always important to be supportive for the younger generation. So I hope our information can be useful for everybody, and please feel free to contact us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sunny, for that very practical and really helpful presentation. And just for anyone who hasn't seen it yet in the chat, my Hong Kong Watch colleagues have sent the website in the chat for HK Brits, but it's very simply hkbrits.com. And if you're a Hong Konger coming to the UK, you can check out that website and as Sunny has outlined, find lots of very helpful information there. So thank you very much, Sunny. And we come now to our last speaker of this very distinguished panel, Neil Jameson. Neil Jamison has had a long and distinguished career in many different NGOs. I won't list them all because we'd go way over time if I did. But in particular, he founded Citizens UK in 1988, the major community organising organisation, the largest. And he stepped back from Citizens UK 2 years ago and then founded a new NGO called UK Welcomes Refugees, of which he's the executive chair. So huge amounts of experience on these questions of settlement and welcoming and so on. So Neil, you're very welcome here, and over to you.
Thank you, Ben, and thank you very much for inviting me. Great to follow Sunny, really, because clearly we need to work together on this. It's not the first time the UK has received relatively large numbers of folk who want to come here, who need to come here, political refugees and so on. But nevertheless, this is a particular challenge because the month after the Hong Kong passport holders are allowed to come will, of course, be the month that we have left Europe. So the climate isn't massively welcoming. However, I also support the fact that the government has taken a risk here. It's fantastic what they've done. I'm sure it could be improved, but basically we want to make the most of it. The main thing I believe what needs to happen is that every city should set up some sort of welcoming committee, and we would love to play some part in that. The thing that UK Welcomes Refugees is specifically interested in is sponsorship. The Home Office is following the example of the Canadians, where sponsoring families is the norm, basically. That won't be necessary for many of the people coming from Hong Kong, but this would be there for a hybrid sponsor arrangement of friendship. Some of the advice, but not all of the advice that Hong Kong Brits can give, but certainly other things from people living in the cities where people want to go. What we do need, of course, is some resources to set this up so that we have advice desks in as many places as possible to guide people into the cities where they want to work, to help them get housing too, and to help them understand what their rights are. In a pretty difficult country at the time with the pandemic, of course, and the Brexit decision, which means that not everybody is welcome. But clearly there are many people who are delighted with this decision, who've already played a big part in receiving the Syrians who've come in flight. Before that, the Ugandan nations, and before that, I was significantly involved in the Vietnamese boat people. So there is a tradition of Britain doing this, and I'm very proud of, and look forward to welcoming as many people who are able to come, given the slight limitations of the rules, to Britain through UK Welcomes Refugees and other organisations with a similar brief. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Neil. That was both extremely encouraging and uplifting and amazingly concise. So thank you for that very much. We now go into a time of questions, and we have about 20 minutes for questions. I've received a few already, and I won't direct all questions to all speakers, both because of time and because some of them are very specific. But perhaps I could start, Layla, with you. You did mention this in your remarks, but there's a question which I imagine is referring to Aleister's bill, which says, what is the status of the parliamentary bill, given that the second reading has been postponed since July? Could you just say a few words about that?
Sure. So there are all sorts of bills that come through Parliament, and those who are aware of parliamentary procedure will know that, bluntly, unless it's a bill that is introduced by the government, it's very unlikely to ever become statute unless it's one of the private members' bills that come very, very high up, and even quite often then, if they've got government support, doesn't happen. So the bill itself is, bluntly, a tool a campaigning tool that we can point to that is a concise place with all the asks that we want in one place, and that allows us to garner media interest and also to point ministers to, if they're wondering as a shorthand, what it is that we want out of them. So am I expecting that Aleister's bill, wholesale as it is going to be taken up by government? Unfortunately not. But I don't think even Aleister suspected that would be the case. What we are hoping, however, is that the elements that are enshrined in that bill, well, not enshrined, but are explained in that bill, are separate things that the government would be able to take on. And actually, bluntly, they don't need a bill to do it. They've shown that they don't need a bill to do it. They just need to have a change in policy direction in order to make these things happen. You also don't necessarily even want a bill, because a bill can take a long time to go through both houses and all the rest of it. So the bill itself is a tool, but what it represents is that broader campaign, and actually a very specific part of the campaign, which we've been really focusing on in today, because we're not going to solve all the problems all at the same time. But I think what it does is it gives the government a direction for what are the most important asks, and many of them have been underlined in the conversations we've had today.
Thank you very much. There are several questions that I think Perseus or possibly Sunny may be best placed to answer. Although if our other two speakers see them in the chat and want to comment, you're very welcome to. The first, Perseus, is there an expiry date for the BNO's +1 application? Is there any particular point where that policy expires?
Not as written, but of course the government can change its policies at any point. It's only a matter of writing in the immigration rules to delete Appendix Hong Kong British National Overseas. Yeah, at the moment that there is no time limit that we've seen. They've not said you have to apply by this date, but yeah, you can't obviously predict what the future policies may be. So unfortunately, there's really no answer to that question.
Thank you. A couple of tax-related questions, which again, Perseus, I might come to you on, and I'll combine them. One person asks, can capital gains tax be waived for Hong Kongers who've had to sell property they lived in before moving to the UK? And can the incomes that a BNO holder earns in Hong Kong during the 2020-2021 tax year before they move to to the UK be waived in the income tax calculation? Yeah.
Wow. Short answer, I'm not a tax lawyer, I'm afraid. I am a human rights and public law lawyer, so that is out of my expertise.
Absolutely, well, it's definitely way out of mine. Sunny, I don't know whether HK Brits has looked into tax questions at all.
We have received some tax question as well, but again, we can only provide what the government has given because we are also not in this area as an expertise. So yeah.
Okay, and Neil, from your expertise, do you have any comment on?
Afraid not. No.
No. Well, to the people who asked, Layla,
yeah,
please.
Not on the specific issue of tax, but I thought I did note a comment that the minister made in response to my urgent question, specifically on financing. And it came a bit later on to an answer from another MP. But the comment he made was, we do expect that those who come over are, able to pay their way and contribute as everyone else. And so I don't know the specifics of your question, whether or not, but what I would say is I don't think there will be special dispensation for those coming from Hong Kong. I think if there are rules that you can use, they are current rules that already exist in law right now. We're focusing on other parts of the cost, but I don't think there's going to be specific tax rules for people who are making use of the scheme, if that's helpful.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Perseus, perhaps I can come back to you with this one. Do you see any possibility for the pathway to citizenship being shorter than the 5+1 years? Is there the possibility for people to be fast-tracked to citizenship?
Yes, there is actually. The government's already said that if you have leave on another route which can lead to settlement, you can add that towards your BNO leave. So, for example, if you've had already 3 years as like a tier 1 or a tier 2, and then you only need another 2 years because you get your BNO visa, and then you can aggregate those years according to the policy. As Eunice has already confirmed to you all, tier 4 students and tier 5 youth mobility scheme, they are not routes to settlement, and therefore at the moment they do not count towards any aggregated leave. This is a surprise. It's a very I'm speaking to other colleagues in the field, we didn't expect the government to even consider aggregating leave. So yes, in effect there is a fast track, but not like through like a tier 1 scheme where if you invest more you get more money. It's literally, if you've had other leave before, you can potentially add that towards your BNO. So it may mean instead of getting your full 5-year visa, you get your 2.5 years, because within that 2.5 years you can aggregate to 5 years and apply for settlement.
Thank you. There's a couple of asylum-related questions and then a couple of employment-related questions. So I'll put the 2 asylum questions together and ask Perseus, but any of the other speakers also, if you'd like to comment on this. Obviously, this webinar is focused on the BNO offer, but it's absolutely right to raise this question because, as Layla said in her opening remarks, there are so many young activists who don't qualify for BNO, and we need to be looking at what routes there are for them. And I think we all know that the asylum system is by far is far and away not ideal, and we ought to be looking at alternatives to asylum if we can. But nevertheless, the question has been asked: what is the status of the asylum system here and in other countries, and what legal assistance can be offered? So, Perseus, do you want to say something briefly on that?
I can't really comment on that because I don't know the asylum systems of other countries. I only practice in England and Wales. That's where my practicing certificate lies. So yeah, I don't know about the other countries' systems, so I can't give you a comparison, I'm afraid.
I could help a little because I've been involved in that work for quite a while. The British asylum system is indeed the worst place to put yourself, although some folks may have no choice. If they do, then there are lawyers who will help. There isn't much legal aid for it, so you'd have to pay for legal help if you do. And there are some lawyers who are very unhelpful but promise you everything. The worst thing about the British asylum system is the detention centres that people can be sent to, and it's the only country in Europe where people are sent to detention centres indefinitely. There is no recourse to law or a lawyer once you get in a detention centre, and for all sorts of reasons, people do get in there and do get stuck in there, and it's a blight on our reputation. So I hope if anybody's thinking of asylum system, think very carefully about another way round that might give you recognition, some safety and some protection.
Layla, do you want to say something?
I just want to echo that. I deal with a lot of asylum cases in my casework office. We used to have a detention centre very nearby, which we were successful in getting closed down, but Neil was absolutely right. And there is an enormous backlog in the system, particularly being caused by coronavirus, but there was before as well. And it's just got worse and worse and worse. If you have to do it, do. If you need help, do contact the MP in the area that you land. And that's MPs can help in a limited way. We can't change laws, but we can help navigate systems. And it's a very, very important part, I think, of the role of an MP is to help people in that situation. When I have raised this with ministers, what they say is, we will be very sympathetic to those who need to take that route, but they then also use that as the excuse for why they shouldn't widen the offer. And in our view, we should just work on widening the offer. But if that's what you have to do, please make sure you contact your MP and Hong Kong Watch and anyone else to provide support, because it is very difficult.
Thank you very much. A couple of work-related questions. One person asks if he's already found a job in the UK and has signed a contract, can they come here legally before the BNO offer begins, before the end of January? And a second question, can I apply for a job in advance? Yeah, similar sort of question, in advance of the BNO visa being confirmed, and if so, how would they provide proof of address, national insurance, ID, etc.?
Yeah, this they can just come here once they get a job, and then if they land now, they probably just apply for the RTR, and then they have their right to work in the UK and start their job.
Great, thank you, Sunny. That's Perseus.
I just want to also say, be careful though, because we've had stories of Hong Kongers being granted leave outside the rules, and then employers refusing to employ them because the correct stamp. So in English law, what is considered not prohibited is usually allowed. So the stamp literally doesn't mention you're allowed to work. It just doesn't mention you're prohibited from working. We've had a lot of cases where employers are refusing to employ people who are on BNO LOTR, leave outside the rules, because their stamp does not say they're allowed to work. So just also be careful about that.
Thank you, Perseus. Neil, did you want to comment on?
Sure, just a quick one, which is the points-based system, which the Home Secretary is very proud of. We have had a points-based system here for quite a while. That still should allow the bright, the talented, and the folks who are employed by, like HSBC, for instance, to come and go as they can at the moment. So it's a different issue, but the points-based system, Britain will still have an obligation to people whose talents and skills that they're looking for, I'm sure. But that won't apply so much for the youngsters, of course. It would have to be somebody with a track record, I imagine.
Thank you very much. There's a lot of questions coming in now, and we're not going to be able to get to all of them, so I'm scanning them rapidly. A question on the status of dependents who are over 18 but born after 1997 and who are not, therefore, BNO holders, but whose at least one parent has BNO status. How are they treated? Perseus, do you want to take up that one?
Yes, of course. So as I mentioned, the rules seem a lot more generous than the initial policy statements. So if you are a child of a BNO status holder born after the 1st of July 1997, on or after, you have to show that you're living with the BNO status holder, and then you will apply for the visa under the online scheme together with the as a family unit.
Thank you. That's very helpful. We are almost out of time, and I think we may perhaps we could draw to a conclusion. And I apologize to those whose questions either haven't been able to be asked because of time, or for example, on the tax questions, we weren't able to provide a lot more detail. And also to those who've raised questions through Facebook Live, I've been asked by my colleagues to say that if our speakers are happy to do this, any questions that have come in that we haven't been able to relay here, we will try to perhaps go back to our speakers in due course with specific questions. We'll group them together properly and sort of put them together. But if our speakers are happy for us to come back to you with any specific questions, and then we can relay answers to those who've asked them so that we can try to provide as much information as possible, we will do that. Let me perhaps ask maybe a final wrap-up question based on what Neil shared about the role of civil society in the UK in helping to welcome Hong Kongers who come to the UK, and particularly the idea of every city, or at least every city that Hong Kongers are likely to go to, having a welcome committee. Neil, I wonder if you have a message for civil society in the UK, and then perhaps if Sunny, Perseus and Layla might like to add to it as a way of drawing all these threads together.
A couple of things. Thank you for this. Really is that as one of the most powerful Chinese or Hong Kong institutions in the country is the churches. In church and in all religious traditions, the role of the stranger is more important than the people you know. One reason why I'm involved in this work is it changes the nature of our relationship with the world if we know somebody who is in some difficulty. David Cameron, in his recent book about himself and the lessons he learned, he owns up to the fact that it's all a question of luck. There but for fortune go you or I. And I know lots and lots of people in civil society who do believe that, which is why I hope this time we can get right that the role of civil society is crucial to the reception that people have. It's crucial to the advice on housing. We haven't talked about housing, but housing is a real challenge for anybody that hasn't got a lot of money. And that's where civil society can help. Landlords can help. Of institutions in civil society that the government tends to avoid because it's a bit complicated and so on. And I like to think that UK Welcomes Refugees and other groups who have a reach into civil society will rise to this occasion, because there but for fortune go you or I.
Thank you, Neil. Sunny or Perseus, would you like to add to that?
I think probably also with civil society, sometimes integrating the community, doing volunteering work, I think that is a way to kind of know the locals and kind of interacting people. I think that is something that I think we should all do really when you come to UK and start settling. I think that could be a first step to meet new friends, and yeah.
Absolutely.
I think I would add is this. It's clear that civil society, or society in general, has seen rifts recently, be it caused by differences in political opinion. As Layla mentioned and highlighted, some issues can only be solved through bipartisan cooperation. Perhaps it's time to really work on putting our differences aside again, and actually working together as a whole society to try and work things out, rather than concentrating on, who's left or who's right. I think, there is room for cooperation regardless of differences, and we have to focus on our similarities rather than what divides us now. It's very crucial at the moment. That's all. I think that's all I will add to Neil's comment about how society can work.
Brilliant, thank you. And Layla, the last word from you.
Well, simply to say, Perseus, I could not agree with you more. And it's more important than ever. It's how I do politics. It's why I got into politics, because bluntly, I was fed up with seeing the cross swords over the dispatch box style politics. I think it's what people don't like about British politics. I think it's what people don't like about world politics. Wherever we see it, it is divisive and never goes anywhere healthy. And it's time for us to reclaim that sense that we actually have, to speak a phrase that was coined by someone else, more in common.
Thank you very much, Layla. That's a really wonderful note to end on. And let me first of all, before I say thank you, let me say I'm sorry to all those who who asked questions who we didn't manage to get to. An hour is never enough time to do this topic justice. But I would say that this is part of an ongoing conversation. This is not a one-off webinar. And you've heard from Sunny about HK Brits. You've heard from Neil about some of his ideas. Layla in the parliamentary sphere, and Perseus from a legal perspective. There are a lot of there are a number of different initiatives being set up to prepare to welcome Hong Kongers who come to the UK. I'm involved in a number of other groups that haven't been mentioned here. And so all I would say to all our listeners is, firstly, we will definitely try to get back to you on those questions that haven't been asked. Please stay in touch with Hong Kong Watch, and if there are ways that we can be of help, either ourselves or by connecting you with other organisations as you prepare to come to the UK, please do. And this is an ongoing conversation. And the last thing I would say before we close and before I thank our speakers is I would much rather that this wasn't having to happen, and I'm sure that would be the case for all of us. I lived in Hong Kong for the first 5 years after the handover from 97 to 2002. The last thing I want is Hong Kongers leaving Hong Kong. The whole point of Hong Kong Watch was to fight for Hong Kongers' rights and to defend a society in Hong Kong that Hong Kongers could continue to feel safe and free in as their home. But given the way things have gone in the last year, we recognise the fact that many Hong Kongers will be thinking of leaving. And so if you are preparing to leave, if you are preparing to take up this BNO offer or to come in a different capacity, please know that you are very welcome in the UK. And I think all of our speakers have emphasised that very clearly, and we will all do everything we can to make sure that you are welcomed and that you find a new home in the UK, even following the tragedy of having to flee your first home. So a very big thank you to all our speakers, to Neil Jameson, to Sunny, to Perseus, and to Layla Moran. Thank you for giving your time to be with us, and we'll look forward to following up with you and continuing this discussion as we go forward. So thank you everyone for joining us, for tuning in, and please keep in touch and have a good rest of the day or rest of the evening if you're in a different time zone. Thank you very much.